Welcome parents. This is the Elite Striders Track Club high jump tutorial. As you know, we have to officiate the high jump at all USATF youth meets. Occasionally we will have masters and open athletes that will also be competing at those particular meets, championships and invitationals and things of that nature. So we also run the high jump for those age groups as well. I have with me Coach Geronda, I'm Coach Mateo, and we are USATF certified officials. So today we're going to run you through the basic setup of the high jump, as well as how we officiate here with the Elite Striders Track Club. The main and most important component that I want everybody to understand is that we do our very best to make this event the most professional experience possible for all of the athletes involved. It doesn't matter if they're 9 years old or they're 90 years old. We want to give them the most professional experience possible. And that's what you're about to learn today. So the first thing that we have to do is understand our setup. When we get to the venue, wherever the establishment is, generally the high jump pit will be set up in a similar fashion. The standards will be out, the bar will be at the location, and the pit will be out and covered. So the first thing that we have to do is remove the cover. This is an all-weather cover, so we remove this to actually expose the pit. It's clipped down here at the bottom usually, so you just kind of unclip it and just pull it back. All we really need to do is just pull it back so that we can expose the landing surface. Once we've done that, the next thing we'll do is we'll make sure we take our broom and we'll sweep up any debris that might be around the standards itself as well as in between the standards, because we're going to have to put down an indicator line using duct tape is what we use. So in order to put down that indicator line, we don't want to put it on any debris. So we'll make sure we take our broom, we'll sweep the surface, so that way we make sure that we have a clean surface for our indicator line. Now the indicator line is very important. The indicator line determines the plane marking for the athletes, which we will get into later. Usually we use duct tape and it should always be white. The indicator line itself has to exist 3 meters outside of the standards. 3 meters outside of the standards. So one of the first things that we'll do before we put the indicator line in, Coach Ronda, can you grab the other side of that bar? Is we'll set the bar so that we know generally where the standards are going to go. So you can see that the bar sits on the standards. There's kind of a gap in between. We'll make sure that we set the bar so we know generally where the standards are going to be. If the standard was way out here and the bar couldn't fit, obviously we're going to move it so that it fits the proper space. Once we set the bar, we now have to measure 3 meters out from the base of the standard on either side to put our indicator line. Coach Ronda, can you hold that for me? So we set up our tape measure at the base of the standard. We walk out 3 meters, and this particular tape measure has meters and feet. And then what we'll do is we'll take a little piece of tape and we'll just put it right down so that we know, okay, boom, that's 3 meters out. We'll do the same thing on the other side. You can start at the base. I'll walk around. And again, we'll take our little piece of tape, we'll put it down at 3 meters so we know that that's where we're going to go. We can now retract our tape measure. We can take the bar off of the standards, and we can actually lower the standards so that we can put down our indicator line. Now today, we have the good fortune of having the high jump apron slightly wet. So when the high jump apron is slightly wet, it's a good idea to have some thumbtacks to try to hold your indicator line in place at various points. So I have a few little thumbtacks here that I'm going to pull out, and we will use those to help pin our indicator line at a certain point. So what Coach Sharonda is going to do is she's going to take the end of the tape and she's going to walk out to that mark that we had placed out there. Now the mark itself is just a reference. It's not actually the spot where we have to put the tape, it's just a reference. So when we put the tape down, we want the tape itself to run parallel to our high jump pit. So the tape needs to run parallel to the front edge of our high jump pit. So we'll make sure that we try to line it up parallel. Geronda, probably go to your right a little bit while I go to my left. Okay. Does that look parallel to you?
It's a little off.
Which way do we need to go?
I would go left.
For you?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's parallel now.
Good. So once we have that established, where we feel like we're parallel, we can slowly set the tape down so that it will keep that straight line for us. Okay? Now once we have our line down, because again, like I said, the surface is wet, we can put some push pins in the end just to try to help keep that line in place. In order to secure the tape to the track, we want to step on it. Pick up your foot, make sure that you're stepping on the tape the whole time. Don't slide your foot on the tape, because what will end up happening when you do that is that the tape will shift. So always try to make sure that you pick up the tape, pick up your foot and just slide your foot along the tape. And again, with the surface being kind of wet, it may or may not stick, but that's why we pinned it on the edges there. So I'm actually going to throw a couple of pins here in the center, or close to the center, I should say. No, I think we might be okay. Okay, once we have that set up, our indicator line is nice and straight, then we can replace the standards by just lifting them back up in place. Now it's important to understand that the indicator line is actually the plane marker. The plane marker needs to line up right with the front edge of the standard, which is where the bar is going to sit. So right now, our standards are shifted off from our line. So we're actually going to have to pull the mat back just a bit so that we can put the standard on the line, so that this portion here that's going to house the bar is actually right in line with our indicator line. So I'm going to go here to the back. I'm going to pull this mat just a little bit. Now when we put our standard back in place, we should be able to set it up so that it's right in line. One way to test is just by tilting the standard down and seeing if you end up on the line. Bam, we're on the line, so we're good. If we're off the line, like Coach Geronda is slightly over there, then she'll move it and repeat the same process. I think maybe a little bit more forward on the base. Yeah. Yep, perfect. You're good, I think. Okay, at this point we'll replace our bar. Now when we put our bar up, we have to make sure that our bar is 2 fingers width from the end of the standard to the edge of the bar. So 2 fingers width, end of the standard, edge of the bar. I'm a little close here, so I'm going to back up just a bit. Are you at 2 fingers, Coach Geronda? And of course, it doesn't have to be exact, but it does need to be approximate. You want to have enough of the end of the bar on top of this faceplate so that it's solid, but it's not pinched up against the edge of the standard. So actually, my 2 fingers are a little wide, so I'm going to come in just a little bit. So maybe here I'm about 1.25 fingers. Maybe Geronda's fingers are a little thinner than mine, and so you know, hers is exactly 2 fingers. We'll also do the same thing on the bottom rail, just to make sure that it's not a tremendous, you know, that it's not a tremendous gap, because sometimes these rails themselves are a little skewed. Once we have that set up and we have our bar in place and we know that it is sitting on there correctly, now we can tape off the actual standard. So what does that mean? We're going to tape a box around the base of the standard. We need to do this because sometimes during competition the standard will get bumped and the standard might move. So we always want to replace the standard back in its original position. So we'll tape a box just around the perimeter of the standard. And again, for today's purposes, because the track is wet, we'll need to make sure that we put down some push pins. I think usually in the corner is sufficient enough to secure the tape to the track. Try to make sure that when you put your tape down that it's nice and clean. I'm kind of getting a little messy over here as I'm ripping this tape. So try to make sure that you have nice straight edges when you put that tape down. One thing to keep in mind is when you place this standard, you have to make sure that the base of the standard is 10 centimeters away from the high jump pit itself. And this is something that will be adjusted throughout the course of competition. As athletes land on the pit will shift. So you'll constantly be making sure that the standard itself is not touching the pit. And again, 10 centimeters is a good rule of thumb to have from the beginning. So here you can see we're exactly about 10 centimeters away. The next thing we have to make sure of is the placement of the bar and the bar setting. So the bar itself has some crucial features. We talked earlier about the fact that it needs to be about 2 fingers or so away from the edge of the standard. We also have to check for the sag of the bar. Every single high jump bar has a sag. Regardless of how new it is, obviously the sag for newer bars is going to be much less than the sag for older bars. So I'm going to show you here on this particular bar the sag. So here you can actually see the sag of the high jump bar. Like I was saying earlier, all bars have a sag to them. Notice as I rotate the bar, if you look at that white spot that's approximately right there, as I rotate the bar, you'll start to see it bow. Do you see how it slightly turns to the left? Now I rotate it and it's turned up, and now it's turned to the right. You can kind of see like a curve right there. So again, all high jump bars have a sag. Our responsibility is to make sure that the sag is at the bottom of the bar. We don't want the sag to be at the top of the bar. We don't want it to be facing one side or the other. We have to make sure that we set the sag at the bottom of the bar, which means that we have to also adjust these holders here on either side to make sure that the flat surface of the holder is in line with the actual sag of the bar. And so these holders generally can rotate. See how well I can do this. You see it kind of moves a little bit, or it moves that way. So we just want to make sure that the bottom of the sag is actually the bottom of the bar, and when it's placed on the standard itself, that this portion is flat against the standard with the sag being at the bottom. So if I come back over here, once we get the bar placed back, we've determined our sag. We want to, like I said before, make sure that these portions are flush. This flat portion here is flush against this surface here. So you'll notice this one here is flush. It's perfect. If we walk down to this end here, you can see where this one is crooked. You can see how it's off. And so we don't want that. So at this point, we'll just try to stabilize the bar and rotate that top piece so that it now comes in flush. We still have slight rotation there. So let me do it again. Oh, I over-rotated. And that'll happen. So you just kind of come back down. Now we're there. This as well, like I said before, about the placement of the actual standard itself in relation to the mat. This will happen throughout the competition. So now, getting back to our bar. Once we have everything set up the way that we want it and we've established where our sag is, we need to determine A, the midpoint of the bar, and B, we also need to determine by indicating with tape how flat these are. So what I'll do here is we'll take the tape measure and we'll run it against the length of the bar to determine how long our bar is. Now most high jump bars are between 390 and 400 centimeters, so about, 3.9 meters to 0.1 or so meters. This particular one is what? Let's say 401, okay? So it's 4.01 meters. So that means our center of the bar is going to be at 2.5. So here you can see the center of the bar is 2.5. And why is this important? Because on this bar, the center of the bar is the lowest point of the bar. That's where the sag is. So all measurements for competition are going to take place from the center of the bar. So what we do is once we determine the center of the bar, we put a piece of tape here. And you can see that there's already a piece of tape here, which I had done previously, over the years. What we like to do is put like a mark on the top of the tape, so that way we know what the top of the bar should actually be. If this mark was facing down, then that would mean that our sag is protruding the other way. Once we have that, we'll take a piece of tape and we'll walk over to our ends. We'll put a piece of tape on the top edge of our collar and a second piece of tape directly in line with that top edge. What I also like to do is I'll put another piece of tape on the left side, just kind of like this. And what that does for me is it indicates that this is the left side of the bar. So we always, when we put the bar back, we want to make sure that this tape is on the left standard. I'll do the same thing on this side. Oops. By putting a piece of tape across the collar at the very top edge, ideally much cleaner than I'm doing right now. And then because I messed up the tape here, I'll just take this little piece here and I'll put that right here again on the top edge. Now, why am I doing this? Because throughout the competition, like I told you earlier, this bar will rotate. And these are just good indicators for us that, as the participants hit the bar and all of a sudden it's skewed this way, I know, okay, let me rotate it this way to put it back in line so I know it's flush. It'll also give me an indication of the fact that the top of my bar should always be facing up. So these are the primary things that we need to know in relation to the bar. The last thing that we need to know in relation to the bar is, again, like I said earlier, our measuring point. So we use this transit rod, also known as a high jump measuring stick, and we'll kind of use it as a plumb bob. So we'll put it right here on our, we know this is our center line. We'll put it right here on our center line so that it contacts the ground there at the bottom. And then what I'll do is I'll put a piece of tape just right here on my indicator line on the ground so that I know that that is the center spot. This is my piece of tape. Sometimes I'll extend the tape so it's just a little bit further beyond the indicator line. So that way, anytime I come to measure for competition, I can just put the bottom of my transit rod right on that piece of tape and I know that I'm directly in line. My transit rod isn't skewed this way or skewed that way or even set back here, which also would affect the measurement, or too far this way, right? I know that my transit rod, my high jump measuring stick, is directly in line with that piece of tape to get the most accurate reading. So just to recap, we have 5 things that we want to focus on in relation to the bar. The first one is the bar sag. Remember, we want to make sure the sag of the bar is at the bottom of the bar. It's not facing to the right, it's not facing to the left, it's not facing up. The second thing that we want to focus on is ensuring that our collars are flush with the surface of our standard. So we want to make sure those things are flat and not twisted. The third thing that we want to focus on, the third point, is finding the center of the bar. So that's where we took our tape measure and we made sure that we identified the center of the bar, placing a piece of tape there as well as a mark on the top so that we can understand the top of the bar. That leads us into the fourth thing, which is orientation. We put the tape at the center of the bar, putting a Sharpie mark at the top so we can indicate the top of the bar. We also put some tape on the collar and the bar itself on either side of the bar itself so we can indicate the top of the bar, as well as if we need to make any turning adjustments to the bar itself, we know that we're now at the top of the bar. And in addition to that, we put a piece of tape on the left side of the bar so that we know when we put the bar back up that that side is always on the left. You can take a Sharpie and write L on the tape or write R on the tape. You can put one on either side. It's up to you. The fifth thing that we need to know in relation to the bar is making sure we have 2 fingers or so spacing between the edge of the standard and the edge of the bar. So those are the 5 things that we need to understand in relation to the bar. Let's go ahead and add a bonus for those of you that were listening to the previous recordings and paying attention. How far does the base of the standard need to be from the mat? Once again, how far does the base of the standard need to be from the mat? So I'll give you the answer, a couple minutes, couple seconds to think about it, 10 centimeters or so. You want to make sure that the base of the standard is never touching the mat, and that will shift and happen during competition.